Hi, everybody. I wanted to touch base about your needs assessment outlines. I've read them, they're very good, but there's some data that you could start to try to get before we meet again on Monday. So here we go. Um, these are some items to consider. So there's very specific types of data that you need, and the data that you have is very good, but you need some more data. So here's an example of a couple different risk factors and the kind of data you need to have. So, for example, if poverty or socioeconomic status were one of your risk factors, you would need these type of data. So you have to show disparity in your population compared to the United States. So one way to show that poverty disparity is to talk about, there's two ways here. So the first way is how many people live in poverty in the US and then compare it to your population. And the example on the screen says the poverty rate in the US is 12%, but in the American Indian communities, over 55% of them live in poverty. Another way to show disparity is to talk about people by race. So you could say Blacks make up 18% of the United States population, but they make 52% of those living in poverty. In both of these cases, the data are very clear in showing disparity. And so when I said in the prior lecture that let the numbers talk, let the data talk, you don't need to say, oh, and this shows there's disparity. It's very clear there's disparity when you make statements like this. So let's look at the next one. So here are data examples for access to services. So if a risk factor of yours is that people do not have access to services, here are two ways that you report that disparity in data. So, and these data do exist. So one way is you would talk about how many services exist in the United States and then compare it to specific communities. So for example, you could say in the United States, there are 20 healthcare facilities for every 100,000 people. However, in urban areas, there are only 12 healthcare facilities for every 100,000 people. Again, the numbers are very clear that there's an access issue. Then you can also do it by geographical area, and the data are reported in both ways when you're talking about access. So one way you could say it is in the US, there is an average of 28 healthcare facilities in 100 square miles, but in rural areas of the United States, there's an average of 5 healthcare facilities for 100 square miles. Again, the numbers are very clear. So this is another way to show disparity when you're talking about access. So here is another one talking about a specific behavior. So you could say in the US, an average of 18% of the population smokes, but in the American Indian communities, the average is 32% of the population smokes. Or you could say American Indians make up 2% of the US population, but they make up 14% of the smokers. So again, if you have a specific behavior in your grant that you have as a risk factor, these are ways to show disparity in the grant population versus the US population. You will not only need these data for this paper, but you will also need them for the next paper. So that's it. And I just wanted, before I close out, these data are available at the Census Bureau. They're available at Centers for Disease Control. And depending on for example, if it's smoking, the Lung Association, the Cancer Society, they all have the data also. So keep that in mind as you're fine-tuning your needs assessment. Again, your needs assessment outlines overall are really, really good. Um, work on the items I left you for feedback, and then try to start to get these type of data for your risk factors. And I'll see you in Monday in groups, and we can talk about specific questions you have for your needs assessment. Have a great weekend, everybody.